Imagine packing the last box into your dream lakeside cabin. The one spot on Serenity Lake that sat just outside the HOA lines like a middle finger to every ridiculous rule ever invented. You step onto the porch, coffee in hand, ready for the silence you paid for in blood and savings. Then she appears, clipboard raised like a battle flag, smiling the kind of smile that says, "I own this lake and everything that touches it. Welcome to Willow Creek Estates," she purrs. "I'm Deborah Langford, HOA president. And I believe you have something that belongs to the community now." That was day 1. By day 3, I was already wondering if moving here had been the dumbest decision of my life. My name's Ryan Harper. I bought the cabin because the county plat map showed my dock, my shoreline, and my entire backyard stopped exactly 3 feet short of HOA jurisdiction. 3 measly feet. To Deborah Langford, that 3 feet was a personal insult. A crack in her perfect little empire of matching mailboxes and approved shrub heights. She patrolled the neighborhood like a shark in pastel cardigans, eyes scanning for violations the way normal people scan for sales. And from the second my keys turned in the lock, I became public enemy number 1 simply for existing outside her control. I tried to stay invisible. Kept my blinds drawn, my music low, my lawn the exact shade of green God intended. But Deborah wasn't having it. She started small. Friendly notes taped to my gate suggesting I volunteer my dock for the annual lakeside mixer. Then the notes turned into voicemails. Then the voicemails turned into thinly veiled threats about how difficult life could get for non-team players when it came time for dock repairs or property tax appeals. I laughed it off. Big mistake. The real fun started the Friday I blocked off for my first real vacation in 2 years. I pulled into the driveway at dusk, expecting nothing but loons calling across the water. Instead, I found 6 luxury SUVs parked crooked along the path, a giant banner stretched between 2 oaks that technically belonged to me. "Welcome to Serenity Lake Retreat. Private waterfront access included." My stomach dropped. Before I could even kill the engine, Deborah materialized like a demon summoned by bad taste, clipboard gleaming under the security light. "Ryan. Perfect timing," she sang, stopping exactly at the invisible line where my gravel met the public path. "We had a tiny booking mix-up at the community lodge. These lovely guests needed overflow space and your cabin is just so picturesque. If you'd be a dear and leave the back door unlocked, I'll make sure everything's spotless by Sunday." She flashed that plastic smile again, the one that never reached her eyes. I stared at the banner, then back at her. "You told strangers they could stay in my house?" She waved a manicured hand. "It's only 2 nights. And honestly, it would be such a shame if certain variances for your dock suddenly got complicated. You know how the board can be when neighbors aren't cooperative." The threat hung there, sweet as poison. I felt the old familiar rage, the same rage I'd moved here to escape, bubble up and then freeze into something colder. Something calculated. I smiled right back. "Deborah, that's not happening. Ever." I walked past her, unlocked my own door, stepped inside, and locked it with a click that echoed like a gunshot. Through the peephole, I watched her face twist from sugary hostess to pure venom before she spun on her heel and stormed off, barking orders into her phone. That should have been the end of it. It was only the beginning. The next morning, I woke to the sound of laughter and clinking glasses drifting through the pines. Guests were already treating the shoreline path like their personal red carpet, pointing at my cabin like it was part of the tour. One guy in boat shoes actually tried to pull into my driveway until I stepped out and pointed at the private property sign I'd hammered in the night before. "Sorry, buddy," he called, genuinely confused. Deborah said parking was open up here. Of course she had. By evening the party had spilled closer. I was reading by the fire when I heard the scrape of metal on metal at the back door. Heart hammering, I killed the lights and crept to the window. 2 shadows crouched there, one holding what looked suspiciously like bolt cutters. HOA logo embroidered right on the glove of the taller one. I slammed the floodlights on and pounded the glass. They scattered like roaches, dropping the glove in their panic. I called the sheriff's office. Big mistake. Deputy Kyle Langford, Deborah's nephew naturally, showed up 30 minutes later wearing the same smug expression as his aunt. He barely glanced at the glove I held out. "Kids messing around, probably. You sure you didn't imagine it? Filing false reports can get folks in a lot of trouble around here. He left without taking notes. The message was crystal clear. The law in Willow Creek wore pastel and answered to Deborah. The next morning brought a bright orange violation tag slapped on my door. Failure to participate in community enhancement events, code 14B. I wasn't even in the damn HOA. I almost laughed. Then my phone buzzed. My buddy Marcus from the city. Dude, when did you start renting out the cabin? Saw it on some vacation site, 5-star reviews already. The link he sent made my blood run cold. There it was, Serenity Lake Waterfront Escape. HOA managed private dock and fire pit. My stolen photos. Fake reviews praising Deborah's seamless check-in service. The listing was active, bookings open, and my cabin was the star attraction. That was when I stopped laughing. I bought the heaviest padlock money could buy, installed motion cameras, and started documenting everything. Deborah's face when she saw the new chain and the bigger private property sign was priceless, pure, unfiltered panic wrapped in fake concern. This is hardly neighborly, Ryan, she hissed from the safe side of the line. Community aesthetic guidelines matter, even for outliers. Consult the county plat map, I answered calmly. And tell your friends if they step foot on my land again, I won't be calling your nephew. She flushed crimson and marched away, but the harassment simply evolved. Fake utility inspectors showed up. Laminated community asset signs appeared nailed to my dock. Rumors started flying through the neighborhood Facebook group. I was supposedly selling to a noisy corporate retreat developer who'd ruin property values. Deborah positioned herself as the heroic defender of Serenity, while quietly pocketing deposits for a cabin that wasn't hers. I stayed silent. I watched. I collected. My Aunt Linda, retired real estate attorney and original signer of the old bylaws, came through with gold. She dug up the 1998 incorporation maps proving my 3 feet of paradise had never, ever been HOA territory. Article 9, Section 3 stared back at me in crisp black and white. Any president found guilty of misrepresentation of community assets for personal gain or actions bringing the association into disrepute could be removed by majority board vote. I had the clause. Now I needed the proof. The motion cameras delivered. Night after night they caught Deborah's assistant Chloe sneaking around my deck, trying doors, measuring windows. Guests started showing up at my gate waving confirmation emails with my address. One couple, the Petersons, paid $800 for the waterfront suite, and were devastated when I gently explained they'd been scammed. I handed them my card and suggested they call their bank. The look on their faces when they realized who'd taken their money was pure gold. Deborah's big lakeside bliss weekend was set for Saturday. Tables, lanterns, a pontoon boat with ribbons, the whole ridiculous production built on the lie that my cabin was part of the package. I waited until the guests started arriving, then stepped onto my porch like a man who'd been waiting his whole life for this moment. The party was in full swing when the first confused couple approached my gate. "Is this check-in for the private cabin?" the woman called, phone in hand. I stepped outside, voice carrying just far enough. "Ma'am, there's been a mistake. This is my private home. It's not for rent, never has been. I believe Deborah Langford sold you something that doesn't belong to her." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones came out. Whispers turned to murmurs, then to angry shouts. Deborah tried to smooth it over with her trademark smile, but the damage was done. Guests were comparing screenshots, demanding refunds, filming everything. The music cut off mid-song. The perfect HOA queen stood frozen while her empire of lies crumbled in real time. But that was only the warm-up. By the time Sheriff Brody, the one not related to anyone named Langford, rolled up, half the guests were already packing their coolers and posting 1-star reviews. I invited him inside, laid the entire folder on the kitchen table. County maps, camera stills, forged documents, payment screenshots, the glove, the bylaws clause, even the check Deborah wrote to buy those fake 5-star reviews. He flipped through it all, eyebrows climbing higher with every page. "Mr. Harper," he said finally, "this is one of the most thorough evidence packages I've seen in 20 years. We'll be filing charges, fraud, trespass, forgery, the works. Whether the DA goes criminal or the victim sue is up to them, but this report is going straight to the board. Outside, the Lakeside Bliss weekend had officially become the Lakeside disaster. Deborah stood alone by the dock, phone pressed to her ear, screaming at someone while guests filmed her meltdown. The woman who'd spent years terrorizing people over mailbox colors was now the main attraction in her own personal horror show. The emergency board meeting was called for Monday night. The little community room felt like a courtroom. Deborah sat at the head of the table trying to look regal, but her hands shook so badly the water in her glass rippled. I walked in with Aunt Linda, Sarah the neighbor who'd been fined for the wrong shade of blue trim, contractor Gary who'd never been paid for work Deborah rerouted to her own backyard, and Mrs. Peterson who'd driven 2 hours just to watch justice happen. I laid the folder down and spoke without raising my voice. I walked them through every violation, every threat, every dollar she'd pocketed. I read Article 9, Section 3 out loud like scripture. Deborah tried to interrupt. Overzealous volunteers. Misunderstandings. This man is clearly unstable, but her voice cracked like cheap foundation. Mrs. Peterson stood next, voice trembling but clear, describing how she'd lost $800 to a lie. Gary dropped his stack of unpaid invoices. Aunt Linda read the original bylaws again for emphasis. The room went graveyard quiet. Arthur, the board member who'd always been Deborah's lapdog, cleared his throat. I move we remove Deborah Langford as president effective immediately under Article 9, Section 3. Seconded. Hands went up. One by one. Even Arthur's after a long stare at the mountain of proof in front of him. Unanimous. Deborah went white as the walls. For 3 full seconds she just sat there, the queen dethroned. Then the mask shattered. You pathetic sheep, she hissed, voice raw. This neighborhood will fall apart without me. And you? She jabbed a shaking finger straight at me. You'll regret the day you ever crossed me. She grabbed her purse and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the framed community photos rattled like they were afraid too. The silence that followed felt like the first real breath the room had taken in years. I walked out into the cool evening air feeling something I hadn't felt since I signed the deed, actual peace. Neighbors who'd avoided eye contact for months now gave me quiet nods of respect. The weight I'd been carrying for weeks lifted, replaced by the gentle sound of water lapping the shore and crickets doing their thing. But peace in Willow Creek had learned to come with fine print. The next morning I stepped onto the porch with my coffee and froze. A single perfect white rose lay on the top step, stem snapped clean, no note. It hadn't been there the night before. The message was loud and clear. Deborah Langford wasn't finished yet. I picked it up carefully, the chill in my spine mixing with something dangerously close to dark amusement. The woman who tried to steal my house had been reduced to leaving flowers like a mafia don who lost her empire. A formal email arrived later from the new acting president, Diane, apologizing for the previous administration's distress, and even asking if I'd consider being an informal liaison between the board and non-HOA owners. I almost laughed out loud. Me, the guy who just wanted to be left alone, now officially the HOA whisperer. Life has a sense of humor darker than mine. News of Deborah's removal spread like wildfire. Gary finally got his check. Mrs. Peterson's bank refunded every cent. The neighborhood Facebook group went from terror to tentative celebration. Someone even painted their door a cheerful forbidden yellow. Wind chimes appeared again. It was like the whole community had been holding its breath for years and finally exhaled. Still, I kept the cameras running. Old habits. Weeks passed. The rose was the last direct threat. No more orange tags. No more fake inspectors. Guests now asked politely before approaching the dock. I even unlocked the gate during daylight hours. Kids waved as they biked past. Hikers asked permission to use the trail. The difference between fear and respect was night and day. One evening at the community potluck, the first one I actually attended, Diane asked me to say a few words. I kept it short. Evidence, patience, and knowing exactly where your property line ends. That's all it takes. The quiet nods I got felt better than any applause. Deborah's name became a cautionary tale whispered over wine. Rumor said she moved out of state to start fresh. I added the final piece to my evidence folder anyway, an anonymous photocopy of the check she'd written to buy those fake reviews. History, not revenge. though the line between the two had never felt thinner. I planted habanero peppers in the side garden with a little hand-painted sign. Not HOA approved. It became the neighborhood's favorite inside joke. Life settled into the quiet rhythm I'd come here for. Mornings with coffee and loons, evenings with the fire pit and stars. But every time I saw that single white rose I'd pressed between the pages of the county map, I remembered. Empires built on lies don't fall quietly. They leave little reminders. And yet the peace held. Months later, on a crisp autumn evening when the leaves turned the lake into liquid gold, I sat alone by the fire pit watching sparks rise toward the stars. The cabin felt solid around me, the land finally mine in every way that mattered. The fight hadn't been won with shouting or lawyers in suits. It had been won with locked doors, hidden cameras, county maps, and the quiet refusal to hand over what was never theirs to take. I thought about Deborah Langford's final scream in that boardroom, the moment the Queen realized her subjects had grown spines. I thought about the guests filming her meltdown, the board members raising their hands one by one, the single white rose that arrived like a death threat from a deposed dictator. And I smiled, the kind of smile that comes after you've stared down a bully and watched her crumble under the weight of her own lies. The neighborhood was breathing again. Wind chimes sang without fear of fines. Doors were painted cheerful colors. People actually talked to each other instead of reporting each other. It turned out all it took was one person refusing to play the game for everyone else to remember they had a choice. I still get the occasional message from new residents asking how I survived Deborah. I tell them the same thing every time. Keep your receipts, know your lines, and never, ever unlock the door for a woman with a clipboard and a god complex. As the fire crackled and the lake whispered against the shore, I raised my coffee mug to the stars in a silent toast. To 3 feet of freedom. To evidence that actually matters. To the sweetest sound in the world, the sound of an HOA Karen finally shutting the hell up. But here's the question that still keeps some of us up at night. When the president of the Homeowners Association tries to sell your private home to strangers, forges documents, and weaponizes the entire neighborhood against you, who's really the villain? The guy who locked his door and gathered proof? Or the woman who genuinely believed the rules she made up gave her the right to own everything she could see? Was I the troublemaker for refusing to share what wasn't hers? Or was she just another Karen who finally met the one person who wouldn't bend the knee? You tell me. Because in Willow Creek Estates, the line between community spirit and straight-up theft turned out to be exactly 3 feet wide. And a whole lot of people are still arguing about which side of it they want to stand on. The fire popped. A loon called across the dark water. And for the first time in forever, the silence that answered felt like victory.